host. I like to say she has a real job. She's in education, so sometimes she can make stuff, sometimes she can't. It's Politzer
Yep.
or Politzer?
Politzer.
Politzer.
Yeah.
All right. We're joined today by Kerry Politzer, who started playing piano at the age of 4, studied classical piano, and now is one of the best jazz pianists out there. How we doing, Kerry?
I'm good, thank you, and thanks for the compliment.
Um, yeah, why don't we just start? I gave a little sketch there. Why don't you give me a little more background about your origin story, and we'll dive in from there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I started out as a classical pianist, and then I proceeded to get tendonitis. But the silver lining was that when I developed tendonitis and kind of stopped playing, I discovered jazz, and that was at New England Conservatory of Music. And I just heard all this great improvisation, and I was like, what is that? That's what I really want to be doing. So I kind of took a year off from playing. I switched into the jazz department, and I just started taking advantage of the wonderful environment that was there in Boston at that time. Some amazing musicians were at Berkeley and at New England Conservatory. And the other thing that was super groundbreaking was that we had the great Brazilian multi-instrumentalist Hermeto Pascoal do a residency at NEC because his goddaughter, Luciana Souza, was a master's student.
Okay.
So that was something that really changed my life, just to see this musical force of nature just composing like 18 hours a day and really just inspired all the time. And that got me really interested in Brazilian music. And to this day, I still study and learn a lot of Brazilian music and language.
Right now, isn't your 2019 album right? Is bossa nova Brazilian? That's does that tie into that?
Yeah, that was Diagonal. That was a tribute to this kind of more obscure Brazilian composer who kind of operates at the intersection between bebop and bossa nova. And I transcribed like 30 of his compositions, and I got a grant to perform his music of, a lot of his classics, and then do an album where I tweaked everything and reharmonized everything and just kind of tried to make it my own.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, Stan Getz, I guess, is most famous, and the woman's name is escaping me now.
Astrid Gilbert.
Uh, yes, yes. So fantastic. Now you have vocals. We mentioned something earlier, and you told me you had a vocal coach. How has that? Well, let's. All right. Let me start over with that. Let me start over. I had written something down that I thought was really witty.
Well, now I want to hear it.
um. Well, I guess where we were going with this was that you had 6 albums out.
Actually, I have
You six,
seven,
seven,
and there's going to be an
seven.
eighth. Yeah.
And there's going to be an eighth coming out, and each one I feel like you have taken another step, like you've never rested on your laurels as you've gone through each one of your albums. Would you say that was a fair statement?
Well, I always like to be, learning new things. So I kind of started out doing, um, it's kind of funny. Like as a pianist, a lot of times we don't really learn about what the other instruments are doing. So I think with Below the Surface and In a Heartbeat, I was really just trying to study more like quintet writing with trumpet and saxophone. And that was really a lot of fun. And I don't know, I just kind of continue my studies through the years. Right now, I have like a lot of an ongoing, you know, very basic beginning guitar study. And now I'm trying to take up some flute and learn some Brazilian percussion. And with everything that I learn, I feel like I try to add it, at least some understanding of it, to the music.
Right. Now, have you've played with a trio, a quartet, you've played with a quintet. How many of the songs from the different projects cross over between those things?
Well, it's kind of funny that you say that, because sometimes, like, you'll record something, or I've recorded something a long time ago, and then I'll listen back to it, and I'll be like, that is not what I wanted to say. That is not the expression that I that's not the adequate expression. So on this new album that I'm going to be putting out, I actually re-recorded a piece of mine called Saida that I did in, like, I don't know, ages and ages ago. But it's not a good rendition. And this piece was like really dear to my heart. Just it has a lot of emotional significance. So I'm like, you know what? I really want to express this better and do it justice. So that is going to be coming out. And you're never completely satisfied with everything, but I'm a lot happier with this expression of this tune than I was before.
Right. I always liken the studio, the song when a LP or recorded as the artifact. It's where something stood at that moment in time, and the living version of it is the one that's breathing and changing over time.
Absolutely. And you might even find that when you're hearing your own music in your head, that a note might change or the tempo might change. Through the years, you just hear things differently.
It's fantastic. I love, love, love that. You now when you do the quintet, you is it still saxophone and trumpet with the piano bass drums? Is that your normal what you go with?
Yeah, I love that kind of modern take on the Blue Note quintet. But I love a lot of other things too. Like with my bossa nova group, I have like nylon string guitar. I love to, sing in Portuguese, and there's that. And then I've also been doing some other commissioned work lately that is totally different. Like I work with the Portland Jazz Composers Ensemble. It's a 12-piece ensemble, and that's a challenge, but I've composed a couple pieces for them. And then recently I was approached with my very first classical commission. So I wrote an 8-minute through composed classical piano piece for this really wonderful Canadian pianist, and now she's like touring with the music from the album. I actually got her a bunch of referrals, like a bunch of different Brazilian American composers, and we all composed a bespoke album of pieces for her. And she's, now she's on the radio with it and she's performing it around it. That was a really cool experience.
You've come full circle there.
I guess so. And I think I'd like to do more of this because it's really fun to write something from beginning to end and have somebody else play it.
Right, right. That's fantastic. All right, let me ask you about Electric Green. All your albums before that were acoustic, right? That this album you added the electric piano. What prompted that? This is where I'm getting the you never rested on your laurels from.
Okay, so I'm not actually, which one is this? Electric, I don't know if I'm familiar with this.
Okay, all right. Then I was lied to. I'm just trying to pull up. When I pulled up your discography, it had that in it.
Well, I mean, I'm totally open to, actually, that's something that I haven't done that I'd like to do, is to record with Rhodes and stuff.
Oh, right, right. Okay. So, all right. Now that totally threw me off. I hate the internet sometimes.
I know sometimes you
It's
go on Discogs and you're like, what is this? Like you find all kinds of stuff on there.
all right. So what was you had after was there an album after Diagonal?
After Diagonal, we did In a Heartbeat, which
Okay.
had a lot of pieces or tunes on it that were composed out of dreams. I would just, the pandemic was a really strange time, and a lot of people began having super vivid dreams. And I would dream music. So the 3 a.m. song, it was actually kind of a nightmare that I woke up from. And there's a couple other Spring Day. I woke up and I was like, what is this? This is not something that I would ever compose if I was awake. And I just had this melody in my head with the counter melody. I'm like, that's different. So that is
Mm,
like my pandemic album.
right. So you have the album, which is a good thing. You got something out of it. How else did you deal with COVID? We've heard from a lot of different musicians, like the bass player for the Disco Biscuits, told me that he practiced more in his life during COVID than he ever had before. And, a lot of bands, we're all that jam. So we deal with a lot of jam bands. They put out the best albums they ever made because they had the time. Do you feel like there was any positives with COVID for you?
Well, the one positive was that I discovered Sound Better, which is this really awesome online portal where you can compose tracks for people. And that kind of kept me a little bit sane because, a lot of people did not want to go into the studio during that time. So I would just I found out about this site and I was like, I don't even know how this works. And I think there was a proposal and I didn't end up fulfilling it. But then this singer in like the Netherlands was like, I want a whole album and I want you to play piano for the whole album. So he would just send me a track, or he would just send me like the song that he wanted to do with instructions, and then I would just we did like 10 songs for him, and my husband played. He set up drums, electronic drums, and bass and trumpet, and then a friend of mine in New York did some horn arrangements, some saxophone arrangements. So that was a blast, and I continue to do sound better tracks. I think that was maybe the one thing that came out of the pandemic that I thought was a positive.
There you go. There you go. Hey, yeah, you got to take what you can get. I'm late.
Yeah,
You
for
know?
sure.
So when you go, I guess maybe this has changed over the time. How do you prepare for the studio? Do you have everything written out? Have you played it live before? Or do you go in with just the sheet music and bring your people in and say, "Have at it, guys! I brought in the best. I know you're going to nail it."
I guess I'm not really big on rehearsal, and like maybe that can work against me, but I'm not one of those people that is like, okay, this has to be perfect.
Hmm.
Because usually the people that I hire are so skilled that everything just ends up working out. There have been exceptions to that, of course, but I don't know. There's so much going on in the world that is not good that like if somebody plays my melody wrong, like you have to put it into perspective.
Right, right, and maybe that's the way it's really supposed to be. I think Miles Davis once said, "You hire the best people, you bring them in, and you get out of the way."
Absolutely. And I would say the same thing with practicing stuff. Like you don't want to go in and improvise what you practiced. You want to put it in your fingers and then let go of it so that when you're on stage, you could try to be creative. I mean, of course, the more stuff that you have worked on, maybe the more colors in your palette you will have. But I don't want to
Mhm.
just get up there. I mean, it would kind of take the joy out of everything if I just, I'm like, this is what I'm going to play. And I think when I was a beginner, I was so anxious about what would come out that when somebody was finished with their solo, I would be sitting here like, oh, I have this idea and this is what I'm going to start with. But it's not really organic to do that. And as I, progressed and the years went by, now I have a much different attitude towards improvisation. I used to like go back and nitpick everything that I did and even try to edit things out. And now I'm just kind of like, whatever, so it's not perfect. I didn't mean to do this. This wasn't ideal, but it was what was in the moment.
Right, warts and all.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it, I love it. How do you approach use improvisation? You said it's changed, I guess, over the years. Today, when you walk on stage, what is your mindset?
It's funny that you ask that because I've actually been talking about this with students and about, performance anxiety. And it's hard not to have the pressure of wanting to get up there and have a good presentation, to acquit yourself well. But there are two things that you can do that you can't really. I mean, I think it's good to think about two things. One is having a good time. Because that's not
Mhm.
a competitive thing, and that's not something that you can have a better time than somebody else, right? You have to be focusing on what you're doing. So that's the first thing, is to have a good time. And the second thing is to try to express what you wanted to say in the moment. And that's not something that anyone else can do better than you either. So, I mean, yeah, somebody might have better swing feel or, be more technically skilled or something. But all that matters when you're up there is what you wanted to express, what you wanted to say, and whether you were enjoying yourself while you were doing it, right? So those kind of
Right,
things, I believe that those two concepts can kind of take you away from the anxiety of getting up and wanting to perform well in front of other people.
right. How do you, when you're improvising, keep your authentic voice while staying true to the composition? I guess this would probably be more for stuff that you didn't write, the covers that you do and
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the most important thing is to try to focus, which is not always easy. You might have a lot of other things going on in your mind. If you're at a venue, you might hear the conversation of the people at the table closest to the
Right.
piano. There's it really changes every day, like what you're trying to do. I mean, sometimes just
Right.
getting through the set was a win.
So right. The bass player for Spafford said sometimes he'll be thinking about, "I need to get the car payment in,"
Yeah.
while he's up there on stage playing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll be thinking about like, oh no, my younger one had a problem with another kid at school.
Right.
But
Yeah.
then you hear people like Bill Evans and you feel like every fiber of his being was concentrated on the next note, and that is definitely an
Mhm.
aspiration.
Right. Yeah, that's gotta be hard. I mean, maybe it's not thinking about it, like a zen of it,
Mhm.
when you're not there, you're completely there or something.
Yeah, for sure. And we also have to think about why we're making music. We're making music to at least, hopefully to kind of make the world a more beautiful place, right? So
Right.
that's a worthy goal to express ourselves and to communicate and to add some beauty.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
those are things I try to think about, like why am I doing this, especially on a night where like last night I was playing for like some chairs.
Right.
So but there are some people there, and so something that I did improved somebody's life to some extent while I was there.
Right. Right, the clinking glasses is never fun to hear, huh?
Yeah, but you're doing something beautiful. Like I mean, you're not. I don't know. You're not trolling people on a message board. You're not like I don't know.
God help us, yeah, I'm with
Exactly.
you there.
You're trying to add some positivity somewhere. And I try to do
Right,
the same
right.
thing with teaching too. I want to encourage my students and encourage them to keep going and to do something beautiful and creative, because I wasn't always encouraged all the time.
Right. Now your husband plays drums with you, right? Or he has on the past couple albums?
Yeah, he's a great pianist, but he started out as like a classical trumpet player and rock drummer. So,
Okay.
but he kind of plays everything. He plays organ, he plays bass. I started taking up flute, and he was like, "Oh, well, I did a semester of flute, right?" And I was like, "Oh."
Of course you did. That's funny. Alan Evans, the great drummer from Soul Live, the last time we talked to him, he said he's given up playing drums, that he's just interested in working in the studio, and he doesn't he plays guitar too. He had the Alan Evans trio where he played guitar, and he's like, I don't do that. He's like, I found as I've gotten older, I just want to help other people find their musical vision,
That's interesting. Well,
which
that's a
is
beautiful thing too.
yeah, that's fantastic. I love the mentoring thing. I mean, you do that. You're in education, right?
Yeah, I teach at Portland State University, and I do like some clinics. Like I was just at University of Oregon. I'm going over to University of Reno to help clinic and give do some adjudication at their jazz festival. And yeah, I'm always kind of trying to do that too. And it's really important to me to try to be encouraging, because one of my best teachers was this legendary Charlie Banakis, and that was one of his, like, something he was really famous for was always encouraging the students and making them feel like they could
Yeah,
do it. Because there's also this old school kind of thing where you're like, it's the gong show, like get out of here.
right.
But that does not work for a lot of people.
No, I used to run poetry workshops in college,
Mm.
and my rule was before you make any criticism about someone's poem after they read it, you say something nice first. You say what you liked about it first, and then we can go in. But if you change, like the yes, but, yes, and kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, otherwise somebody might be really sensitive and not even want to go on.
Right. Well, I always liken reading your poem to somebody, to a group of people, is throwing your baby out into the world, and it's going to get slaughtered, but you
Yeah,
got to throw it out there still.
absolutely. And people are not always going to like or understand what you're doing. So,
Right. Now you said you weren't happy that you had an album that doesn't exist anymore because you weren't really happy with your vocals on it, which kind of gets into this. How and you're with a vocal coach now. You want to talk a little bit about the impetus that you decided to start doing vocals? Have you always been a vocalist or
I mean, I've always kind of liked it. I'll tell you kind of a funny story. So this is going to sound kind of dated, but there was a platform called Second Life, and I guess this was in
Yeah.
the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and you could actually do performances on there. And people would tip you, and you would just be at your computer at home. I would be sitting at my laptop with my keyboard on my lap,
Right.
and I gave a virtual performance, but the problem was that you could get heckled during your performances. They're like texting you and like trying to voice chat you and stuff. And I got heckled. So this guy was like, he's like, you really should just play the piano and stop singing, and I know what I'm talking about because I am a bass player in Germany. And then I was horrified, and so I didn't sing for the rest of that whole set. And then I guess like 10 years went by, and I got out here to Portland because that was in New York, and I found this really wonderful vocal teacher that showed me this thing called the Blaylock technique, and it's all about balance and registration and breathing. And after I studied with her for a while and I did all these exercises, like now I can say that I can sing in tune, whereas before I just didn't have the like physical knowledge of the vocal instrument to be able to do that. And I released that album before I had these wonderful lessons. So it's always a learning process, right?
Yes, it is. And if you aren't learning, then you're not growing. You're not living.
Exactly.
My oldest is 20, turned 20 in February, and she moved in with the boyfriend. And I thought I was gonna be much more distraught about it, but she told me and I was like, "Cool." I was like, "That's a good thing. You're 20, you should be out there, working at a sucky ass restaurant job trying to make it week to week, so you learn these things, you
Mm-hmm.
know?"
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always a learning process.
So you have a new one coming up, Ruminations,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, want to talk a little bit about it, but I read that Hayride
Mm-hmm.
was about Maryland. I live in Sykesville, outside of Baltimore, so
Oh,
that kind of like perked
oh.
up. You,
So you could go to Andi Musique on, I believe it's March 30th, where my husband's going to be playing with Gary Thomas.
oh, tomorrow. Okay. All
I
right. I'll
think,
have to try to figure that out.
yeah. Let me see if it's the 30th or the 31st. So, um, it is on. It's on in Baltimore.org. It says something about George Colligan's homecoming. It looks like it's the 30th from 7 to
Okay.
11.
Okay. I'll have to try to figure that out. That's it. So his connection is you. His connection, obviously, he has here, but you had a connection here. You had family here, or
Yeah, I grew up in Rockville and Potomac, and then I left when I
okay.
was 14, and I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts because I was kind of like a freak of a kid that did not fit in. So they had to
Right.
send me away.
That's okay. There's something with classical piano players. A guy named Brian Haas. You ever heard of him?
No.
Um, he was in a band called Jacob Fred Jazz Odyssey, and he does something called Electric Beethoven now, which is incredible. You should look
Wow.
up Electric Beethoven. It's weird
Okay.
stuff. But he was a classical prodigy, kind of thing, where he went and to competitions and stuff like that, and then he discovered jazz
Mm.
and walked away from doing the classical stuff because he said it was more it offered more to him. It wasn't what was written in front. You were given the. He has a thing with a cello player where it's all improvised. They just walk out and start playing,
Oh,
just
cool.
keyboards and bass. Yes, which is fantastic. But so let's talk a little bit about this album. Are we going to have some vocals on the new one, or is it all going to be the instrumental stuff?
It's instrumental, but I already have a lot of other things in the pipeline that I'm thinking about, but maybe I'll talk about this first. So Ruminations,
Yeah.
it's kind of an album, and I guess a lot of my albums, they don't necessarily have a theme, but there are several songs on this album that deal with like persistent and intrusive thoughts. So
Okay.
there's a song called Persistent Memory. There is Ruminations. There's a song called Letting Go. There's just a lot of different songs about how hard it is to stop thinking about certain things.
Right, and so we went through dreams, and now we have waking dreams, I guess, with trying to stop thinking
Yeah,
about
the
things,
faraway dreams. That's a kind of a like a pensive
right.
piece, yeah.
Now, do you feel like do you feel like with this album that you've broken new ground, or are you've developed a sound that you feel comfortable in with this configuration of a band?
Well, I mean, this actually well, the album was not really my idea. My husband was like, you need to record something." And we kind of, like we experimented with a new studio that was very live instead of, with isolation booths. So
Mhm,
it was just kind of, a project that he just kind of felt like we should record something, even though I have some other projects in the pipeline that are maybe more going to be more fleshed out. So this was kind of
okay,
mostly playing tunes. Like I want to record an album that's a tribute to Jimmy Jufrey and has a lot of free playing with clarinet and bass, and that's something that I basically got one piece composed for that, which is called Cudgel, and we did record that on this
mhm,
album. But I want to do that. I also want to have like another project that has more like Tanya Maria style stuff. Um,
mhm,
so I always have some other ideas. And then I also have a project where I want to record a bunch of pieces that are based on like the piano pieces of Ernesto Nazaré, the Brazilian choro composer. So those are more projects that have a theme. This was more like I wrote some new tunes and I had some super old ones and we never recorded them before.
alright, so how did you come to Jimmy was a mentor to you, wasn't he?
He was my first jazz ensemble teacher at New England Conservatory. And I just had no idea of what a master he was because I was like a kind of a stupid kid and I just wanted to learn how to be a jazz pianist and how to make my playing sound like jazz instead of classical. And meanwhile, I had this like monster in front of me, this just absolute like paragon of composition. And I had the opportunity to study privately with him, but I didn't take it. Instead, I did learn a lot in the ensemble, and he was also incredibly wonderful and encouraging and just the loveliest and humblest person. But I did not take the opportunity to study privately with him. So now I'm studying with him posthumously by transcribing a lot of his work just to see exactly what was going on.
Right, that's fascinating. I guess I never I'm as not being a musician, I don't think of things that way. The image that popped into my head was, Prince going through all the papers in Purple Rain
Uh huh. Uh huh. Well,
and stumbling upon something fantastic there. Alright, so let's do a little more about the live. You said you played last night? Or you said you played last night?
yeah, I mean, I'm always just, now that my older one is 14, I'm finally just getting out of the house consistently. And I'm like, you can watch your brother, here's a phone.
Right,
So
yeah,
now I'm just
uh,
kind of taking whatever gig gets thrown at me because, for so
okay,
many years I was like, oh, I have to get a babysitter. I don't know if I can do it. Even now we share a car and, some equipment. And so I'll be like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, but I still really just, I want to start getting out there now.
right. How do you, pick your set list? How do you decide what to play?
Well, I guess it depends on the venue. I mean, if it's a more, I have a bossa nova group, and I also focus on Brazilian composers, particular composers with that. So with that, there's like a little subgroup with the guitar player, and now we're focusing on the music of Toninho Horta. So that we have like a concert at Strum Guitars on April 7th, and we're going to be just playing all of his music. Oh, not all of his music, but the the sets will comprise just purely Tonino Orta compositions.
Right,
So I get really
right,
obsessed with a certain composer sometimes, and that can be really fun.
right. Oh, it's always fun. That's how I discovered so much music.
Yeah,
Oh, Tony Rice, I never heard this guy. Let me listen to every album over the next 3
yeah.
months.
Well, he's so interesting because he writes very guitaristic stuff. He composes and sings on guitar, and
Right,
it's incredibly harmonically sophisticated, but there's always like this kind of very melodic, very singing melodic melody on top.
Are you transcribing the guitar to piano?
Well, I have the good fortune to have his this out of print book of all 108 of his compositions.
Okay.
So, but I also transcribe stuff just to make it easier for me to read.
Right. I met a blues piano player in New Orleans once who had transcribed all of Robert Johnson's guitar songs to
Oh my
piano.
gosh! Wow,
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
that's amazing.
Pretty neat. And some of them he did like all slow and creepy. It was a
Wow.
good thing there. So well, how about when you go with the jazz with the quintet? How do you work the set list for that? I There's a few videos on YouTube for everyone listening if you want to go check out what that is all about.
Well, the one at the Montevilla Jazz Festival, we only had an hour, and I wanted to feature the music that was from the CD, and so
Mhm.
I think we played everything from the CD except for that "Faraway Dreams" that I just recorded on
Mm,
this new album. Um,
okay.
so yeah, I just try to mix it up with, tempos and feels. Like if there's more
Mm,
like swing feel, up tempo swing, or if I'm doing something that's straight eight. It's always good to have variety. If you have everything sounding the same, then the audience might fall asleep.
right. There is an art to writing a good set list.
Yeah.
I have a YouTube channel where um we recap every Fish show after it's over.
Wow.
And a lot of what we do is crap on their set list choices and where they fit.
Okay, well, don't do that to me.
Um, yeah, that's fantastic. All right, so I totally spaced what I was going to ask. That's okay.
So
That's
you're in
okay.
Maryland right now.
I am in Maryland. Yes,
I used to love
I
to go to
love
Ocean
Maryland.
City every summer.
Yes, Ocean City is great. My kids every summer. That was our big thing.
Yeah, I want to go back. It has like
Was
the best junk food.
yes. It certainly does. It certainly does. All right. So let's think about when this album Rumination is coming out in May 15th, 17th, something like that, a couple weeks.
Yeah, something like that. I have to get the details. I think um, I have to ask the label, which is Portland Jazz Composers Ensemble,
Right.
where I released a
Oh,
couple
all right.
different things.
Your Bandcamp page is saying May 23rd is when we can look for it.
Oh, okay. I didn't even look at that. So there's two Bandcamp pages actually. There's my own, which is just Kerry Politzer, and it has all my self-released stuff. And then there's
Right.
the Portland Jazz Composers Ensemble page, which is um, I think it's
All kinds of
PJCE
stuff.
or something.
Yes.
So I didn't
All
realize they had
kinds of
set a release date, but that's good news.
and you're releasing it on compact disc, huh?
Yeah, because I like to send it to a radio guy, and then he, gets it all over the radio, and they still want compact discs with a spine.
Wow, that's crazy. I find the compact disc interesting because of the revolution with vinyl now
I
coming back.
know.
Everybody wants to put out the vinyl,
That's very expensive though. And I guess you can charge a lot of money for it, but you won't necessarily make it back.
right? And you have to find the right label, like Royal Potato, out of New York, the Royal Potato family. Um, Everything he does, he sells out because he has a client base who are going to buy whatever he puts out because
Mm,
they trust what he chooses, kind
hmm.
of thing. So.
Yep, it's definitely
All right,
something people are doing more.
yeah. What is your vision of the industry? AI, Spotify. I know that there are many challenges and a jazz musician on top of it.
Well, I guess that remains to be seen. We're all kind of waiting to find out what happens. I was on Facebook this morning and there was a kind of a really well-known musician who was he was on an airline, I think Scandinavian Airlines, and he posted the music choices and it was like various artists and there was like an AI written sentence that was like dig into this wonderful music by various artists.
It's I tell you, I have an apocalyptic vision of music in the next 5 years even, where AI will be writing commercials and AI will be writing incidental music for movies, which I know makes a lot of, some musicians money, especially people maybe in your space more that deal with instrumental and composition.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I know writers are dealing with this, teachers are dealing with this. The other day, um, apparently, I was on a grant proposal. I was on a committee to approve grant proposals. And it was the feeling among some of the people that there were at least three proposals that were partially written by AI. And then, in school right now, we teach school, and my husband was asking me, what do you do if you have somebody write, they have there's a requirement that you have to go to a certain amount of performances and then write a little review. And what do you do if the review was written by AI?
Right. Is that illegal? I mean, is that something that's frowned upon by the institution?
Well, I guess you're not really going to get anything out of it if you just you don't go to the performance and you just have AI write a
Right,
performance
rather
review.
than, yeah, right. In my mind, I had them going to the performance and then just, like, fudging it by going to AI and, review of a free jazz concert with a piano and a saxophone or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah, it's going to be
and
interesting to see what happens.
it spits something out. You know what I've used it most for? This is gonna sound cheesy, but, when I do tweets, um, like for my Wook Plus or for this, I wanna put emojis, I put the tweet in and put add emojis and have the
Oh.
AI add the correct emojis so I don't have to dig through and think about. That's why I'm using the future. It's it's like you have the history of man in your hand on a phone and you look at pictures of cats all day, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was reading they want to start using it in healthcare, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, I'm very sketched. I told my kids, my daughters, I was like, watch those online apps that like track fertility and stuff. I said, because anybody can hack that,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? That's crazy thing. All right, let me ask you one more thing and I'll let you get out of here. Why are there not more women in music? Why, if 50% of the women people in the world are women, why aren't half the managers women? Half the sound people?
Um, well, I think it's because some of us are taking care of kids, which really takes a bite out of stuff. You spend
Right.
so much time taking care of other people, so that could be part of it. I know that I've spent the last 14 years taking care of people.
Right. Yeah. I've seen not much music. My ex-wife and I split up when the kids were 2 and 4, and I ended up with custody of them. So didn't see any music for a good till after
Oh,
quarantine.
okay, so
I
you totally get
basically,
it. Yeah, you're like just taking care
yeah,
of other people's needs, right?
right, yeah. I spent every weekend doing softball for years because my oldest played travel softball, and God, that was. I loved her playing softball with all my heart, but it was yeah, I ended up with this surrogate family of people that I really didn't like.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
All the other parents there. Yeah, I just, I've talked to some people and they've thrown out that, women aren't handing guitars and that, they're never encouraged. Like my youngest wanted to play stand-up bass and they handed her a clarinet. They talked her out of it.
Well, I think that's changing. Like, I'm actually doing like 6 hours of clinicking at a high school here in Portland. Um, I'm sorry, I don't know why
Oh,
somebody's knocking on the door because I don't have anybody scheduled to come here. And it's going to be, all girls in the jazz group. So I'm going to
nice.
be, mentoring and clinicking, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of that.
Right, right. All right, cool. Cool. Very good. Anything else you want to throw out? Any shows you have coming up in like May?
Well, there's a couple of things I'm kind of excited about. One is I'm playing at Shea Haney in San Francisco, which is a really wonderful house concert series. And yeah, that's in May. I'm also going to play at Mood Indigo in Bend, and that's also in May.
Okay.
I'm trying to kind of get out of here more. I did Seattle Jazz Fellowship last month, and I just kind of want to branch out from Portland and play in more states and just, you know,
Yeah, we
Spread
we
my
need to
wings.
get you on some we need to get you on some festival bills, so the guy walking by at 1 in the afternoon is like, "Oh, what's that? I like that."
I would love to do that. Yeah, I want to, now that my older one can watch my younger one, I want to get out and do more stuff. So
Right, right. Alright, cool. Let me